I'm Rob, the curator of Word 7. I'm really excited today to be talking to David Borenstein, the director of Mr. Nobody Against Putin. And, mate, I am so excited for you that you were nominated for this Oscar. Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you. It's really great to be speaking with you.
So, how did you find out you were nominated? Talk me through that moment when you found out you were nominated and what you were feeling.
Well, I was on a family vacation with my kids. Um, I was on my phone, like trying to watch this live stream. And I started watching it and I started seeing some of the nominees being announced in other categories. And then YouTube had a pop-up ad come up, and there was no way of like getting out of it. And the entire documentary category was announced during that pop-up ad. And so
Wow.
and so I got back to the stream, and I was like, "Oh, did they announce it yet?" I don't even like. I just kept watching, waiting for the documentary to come up, but it had already been announced. But then, of course, the texts and calls started coming in. But I missed it. I missed the drama.
Oh my God. It's always the way. You always get the pop-up when you least want it. Like, go away, I'm trying to watch something. But anyway, look, doesn't matter
Yeah.
because you were nominated. It's very, very excited. Let's talk about why this film has been received so well. Um, let's go to the beginning. What was it about Pasha and his story that made you realize that this had the potential to become a really compelling feature documentary?
Yeah. So in the beginning, Pasha and I connected because he was something of a international whistleblower, right? He wanted to show the world what was happening in his school. And it was a political project, and he wanted to show how fascism takes root in institutions. That's what he wanted to show. And I wanted to help him show that. But that, of course, is not a feature film. That is a political project. That could be a work of journalism. That could be many things. What turned it into a film is when I sent a DP there and when Pasha started shooting. And when the footage had nothing to do tonally with what one would expect would be in a film like this. The footage that I got was very heartwarming footage that felt more kind of in tune with a Mr. Holland's opus than a Navalny or a Citizen Ford, like I originally expected. And I started realizing there really could be something here with this complex mix of tones. And as an editor myself, it was really fun to edit and mix all of this together.
Oh, I can imagine. And I'm wondering, given that this film feels genuinely quite co-authored, Pasha is filming from inside Russia, you're shaping the narrative from the outside. How did you define authorship and creative control in a situation where, like, your collaborator was also your protagonist and was also taking real personal risks? Like, it's quite complicated.
It is complicated. It evolved over time. So in the beginning, Pasha actually responded to a casting call, and our first shoots were me sending a DP there to shoot him in a more conventional way. But after some time, there were two main reasons why he became a director. One is because he really had something to offer. The DP sent me some footage, like a delivery of footage, and in that footage was a folder that Pasha had shot. And I just thought it was amazing footage. It was first person perspective, hours of him just walking around town, like shaking hands with people from behind the camera. 20 minutes of him sitting down, eating cabbage soup while shooting first person. Um, and it was just so great to edit with because it brought you into the flux of daily life from his perspective, and it encouraged us to really see this school through his eyes. For me, that's very exciting because I think that documentary in general is always responding to changing technology. There was a period of time, I think maybe 15, 20 years ago, the DSLR hits the scene. And our job as filmmakers as documentary filmmakers, was let's see how cinematic we can make documentaries. Let's get the coolest, best cameras into the field because this is a possibility now, and we're going to make this seem like a movie. Um, and I had a lot of footage from my DP that did that. Um, but it's in an interesting place where we are right now in 2026, or at that time, 2022, because that footage just didn't move me as much as the very gritty footage that Pasha was shooting. So I think we're in a new phase of technology, the phase where we've moved from the DSLR as the main innovation to the ubiquity of cameras as the main interesting thing to work with. And the fact that filmmaking knowledge has become so dispersed among so many different people, including teachers in small schools in Russia. So I think for me right now, what's most exciting is collaboration, uh, playing with collaboration in interesting ways, and playing with the ubiquity of cameras in interesting ways. And so that, as an editor, as someone sitting down and just kind of naturally going for what stuff most excited me, that is my analysis. That's how it ended up where it ended
Wow.
up.
That is, you completely nailed it. If you look at, for example, the films in your category and just a lot of the documentary films in general, the ubiquity of cameras is an absolute through line. Like it's a really important thing, I think, in terms of filmmaking these days in the documentary space. So let's talk about the tone. You mentioned it earlier because I was taken aback by how much humor, warmth, and joy exists alongside fear and repression. And then I realized, well, of course, that's life, that's reality, that's what a lot of people are dealing with right now in the United States and elsewhere. So, why was it important then to preserve that tonal balance rather than making a purely dark and political documentary? Because that could have worked as well, but this one works better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons. One is just I liked doing that. I mean, like for me, some of my favorite films are films that do this, like films like Brazil by Terry Gilliam, films like Doctor Strangelove, like the Death of Stalin. These are all my favorite films. Films that approach geopolitics in a very kind of in a way that you wouldn't expect. Um, Secondly, it was necessary for the storytelling because in order to understand the loss of this place to fascism, how truly terrible it was to see this school succumb to something so terrible, you had to see it through Pasha's eyes. And because he was a co-director, we could really get into that, and he helped me understand it. And in order to experience this place as he's experienced it, it needs to be filled with love and joy, and humor, because that's what was lost.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we're making a film in a context where every single mistake could have a serious consequence for the people involved on the ground. How did the realities of safety and risk shape the filmmaking process and the editorial decisions that you made?
In every way. So we were really lucky to have BBC come on board really early. They had boots on the ground in Russia. They're one of the few kind of networks that still had that. And we were able to kind of tap into their security team and editorial policy team on a lot of decisions from the outset. And one thing that really became clear, I may have made the film this way anyways, but it became clear from the beginning that Pasha would have to be the only real character in the film because he's the only one that we can evacuate. We can't evacuate everybody in Karabash. In order to make the film, Pasha had to leave. And in order to make everyone safe, we really had to focus just on him as the one person leaving. So it being so personal, so focused on Pasha as a person, it's not because he wanted all the attention on himself. It's because it really was just too dangerous to get too deep into other characters. And it would have to spend a lot of screen time on other characters, but have these barriers where you really couldn't get too deep would have been very frustrating. So we really needed to make it super focused on Pasha as a character. That was an editorial policy that really was informed by the security situation. And then beyond that, there was a whole list of ways of working together because of security concerns, encrypted FTP servers, encrypted messaging apps, speaking very indirectly, like really being like having a high awareness for who's around him when we're speaking, not sharing cuts with Pasha. That was huge. And it was very difficult for Pasha. Pasha sent me stuff. My DP sent me stuff with him in it. I sent them nothing back. But that was necessary because the number one thing that Pasha had going for him was that no one believed him when he said he was making a film. Um, we couldn't have proof circulating around Karabash because the consequences for him getting caught would have been potentially life in prison.
Yeah, literally life or death. This is a more a question about the process of making a film like this, and because, for example, the film captures schools being transformed into instruments of state messaging, militarization, propaganda. As a filmmaker, how do you navigate the ethical line between documenting the propaganda and inadvertently like amplifying it.
Yeah, so like amplifying what Russia is saying.
Yeah, like how do you well how do you do that to make sure that the audience understands that what you're trying to achieve when you're showing what Pasha's up against?
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think the film is a very nakedly subjective film.
Yeah,
Everything about the film is screaming, this is someone's subjective experience. Um, from the footage that I chose to put in, as I said, I was drawn to the first person footage, really feeling someone behind the camera, feeling someone's arm, like seeing someone's arm like go across in front of the camera and take some soup and eat it. Everything visually that I was trying to throw in the edit was just screaming, "This is subjective." And so that is really important to me to just set up the film such that you understand that what you're seeing is someone's experience, and this is a film about how this is experienced and how we react. What the film, one good thing that the film could do is to just encourage you to ask yourself, what would I do in this situation? What would I do if the institution that I love, if the school that I work in, the hospital that I work in, the government bureau that I work in, if there is a takeover of this place, if it's being turned into something that I don't accept, what would I do? And in the film, you see many different reactions from Pasha to the history teacher who goes along with a lot of enthusiasm as Pasha's kind of foil, to the normal reaction, which is normal teachers who don't fall onto one side or the other.
yeah. The best documentary features for me are the ones that make me put myself in the shoes of the protagonist and think about what I would do. And that's precisely what this film does. It's so vital in this day and age that people see the film so they can see what is possible. And it is so possible within the blink of an eye, and that's what really freaked me out about this one. I'm wondering as well, mate, the film, like, you talk about these deep these weekly calls, sorry, and you have this deep friendship with Pasha forming over time. How does that personal relationship evolve in terms of making the film? Because you still have to be separate from it and make it, objectively as a filmmaker. But how did that friendship with him really change or evolve over the film, and how did it impact you the way you made the film?
Well, it was interesting. We spoke all the time. He wasn't able to share what he was going through with anyone in Karabakh. So there was a lot of kind of emotional support as part of our relationship. And that's something that happens all the time in documentary. The relationship between director, subject, or in this case, director and subject, or director slash subject, is a complicated one. And often there's so much personal stuff that comes in. For me, that's good. That is the way life should be. Uh, and so there was a lot of emotions. But at the same time, there were such strong security measures and such constraints on how we were able to communicate and share information with each other. There was a certain element that we didn't truly understand each other or even find complete trust until we met in person. Just because you couldn't share everything together, and there was so much tension. I was just so scared that someone would be in the room with him. I wasn't completely sure who was there when I was speaking with him, so I would always be so careful when I spoke with him. And so there definitely was an element in which the fear and the paranoia was a big part of this production, where all of this created a situation where it really wasn't until we met in person and he was finally free and he got out of Russia that our relationship took kind of the next step into truly having trust. And it's actually a little bit of a miracle that the film was made despite all of that. I think just both sides really wanted it to happen. Both sides thought it might not happen because I don't know if what the other side is thinking exactly. But it turned out that everyone truly wanted it to happen, and it just happened.
I think it's a complete miracle that this film is made. And now look where you are talking about it, and it's been so well received. So I'm wondering now, the film's been embraced by audiences, festivals, now the Academy. What does that mean to you personally to see this story really reach such a global audience?
For me, it's a relief. When I was making the film, I was very nervous. We were arranging for a year and a half Pasha's escape from Russia, right? We were helping him leave. And just, there were many things that kept me up at night, but one of them was, well, what if he leaves and like no festival wants to play the film and no one sees the film? Um, that would have been really bad. So for me, there was a fire under my ass, and I think the whole team's ass for the whole production. This guy is giving up his whole life for this film. Let's do it as good as possible. And so for me, it's just that was always the goal: making this sacrifice worth it. Um, not being embarrassed and him saying like, "I left Russia for nothing." So it's just always been about pushing it. And so for me, it's just a relief to see that Pasha's sacrifice has come to something.
Yeah, absolutely. But final question. The film show, and we've touched on this, but I really want to hit on it hard now. The film shows how propaganda and militarization can shape everyday life, especially for kids. Why do you think this story feels so urgent for global audiences right now?
I think we are living in during a time where the dignity of human beings and human rights are being retrenched. There was a post-war consensus after World War II where we started having more of a conception of people's dignity, of children's dignity, of people having the right to think freely, to people being more than just an instrument of the state or the instrument of power. And what we're seeing in Russia is not just what's happening in Russia. We are seeing a retrenchment of the dignity of human beings everywhere. And if we are not going to say that the dignity of children and the rights of children is a thing, then what does have dignity? What do we value? So for me, that is something that is extremely important to look at. And it's also really important to ask yourself, like I said before, what do we do when this happens to us? What do we do when our world comes falling down because of a government that we cannot accept? Pasha sacrificed his whole life. We don't need to do that. But if we can still have a discussion about sacrifice and what we're willing to do, I think that would be very helpful right now. Because I see a lot of people in America, for example, not accepting what's happening around them, but also not doing much. So what is to be done? Let's just end it with Marx and Engels. What is to be done?
What is to be done indeed? David, thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations on a stunning film, and I hope you have a really good night on Oscar night.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.